Hi everybody, my name is Rob Schopf. I'm the owner of Two Boss Performance in New Bern, Wisconsin. We specialize in building American high-performance V-twin engines for the Harley-Davidson motorcycles. I've also been doing this for 30 years, and half that time I've been drag racing. In the last 4 years of my drag racing career, I've crew chiefed and was a chief engine builder on an NHRA Pro Stock Motorcycle powered by an S&S engine. Those engines make somewhere around 350 to 400 horsepower. You have to have a lot of reliable parts in those engines to go up and down the track. What I'd like to talk to you about today is welding flywheels for the American V-twin street performance engines. So what I'd like to show you now is a couple of sets of flywheels that I have here behind me and reasons why I feel welding is not necessary for a reliable high-performance engine. Welding is definitely known in the market. A lot of people do it. I do it, but I do not do it on S&S flywheels. And through this explanation, I hope you understand and will realize why we do not need to weld an S&S flywheel compared to other brands. And the first flywheel I'd like to show you is a stock factory Harley-Davidson 96 cubic inch flywheel. This flywheel has about 800 miles on it. This is the way it comes from the factory. If you notice, the crank pin, flywheel assembly, and the Welch plug, okay, that happens to be on both sides. Freeze plug, Welch plug, same thing. You'll find them inside of a car, holding in the water. That's what Harley-Davidson pounds in the end of their crank pins. Not very stable. It allows the crank to shift this way and this way. Spread, pinch, shift. Because it has a Welch plug, freeze plug style setup in it, it's our feeling that it doesn't put enough press on the crank pin to spread the crank pin into the flywheel when this is driven in. If I was to remove these for you folks, this would be a very thin metal, and it looks just like a cap to keep the oil in. Because again, the oil comes in through the pinion shaft, into the crank pin, out to the connecting rods. Well, if we don't put plugs in there, oil will come out. So Harley-Davidson's put in a Welch plug. Not very strong. So in that case, crank welding is definitely going to be a good idea. If you notice here, this person has welded this crank pin to the flywheel. The reason this was done on this set of flywheels is because this bike had a bad vibration. So when the technician pulled the flywheels out of the engine, put it in a truing stand, he found out that he was within factory spec of 13 thousandths run out on the end of the pinion, but he was about 8 6 thousandths on the shafts. So knowing how to be able to true a flywheel by welding it is a technique, and that's not something that I recommend you trying. If you recommend you have somebody that knows what they're doing, do it for you. This person put the flywheels between centers in a truing stand and welded on this particular flywheel to get it straight. It went that easy. This weld is not very deep at all. It's very shallow. It only goes in, I'd have to say, no more than about 20 to 30 thousandths. This is a 900 thousandths thick flywheel. So the crank pin is pressed into this flywheel 900 thousandths. The weld only went in 20 to 30 thousandths. But we were able to move the flywheel enough by welding it on both sides to get it into a true form to be able to put it back in the motor. Now if you notice, these Welch plugs are still in here. This is what everybody's doing. There's some guys out there that are pulling these Welch plugs out, and they're driving in solid plugs, probe plugs, and welding. You still have, you still have the integrity of the welded flywheel, which when you weld on the crank pin and flywheel, things become brittle. So that's a band-aid fix for what really needs to be done. The S&S flywheel assembly, as you can see, has crank pin pressed in on both sides. But if you notice one big difference, this is a big difference, folks. You see this center plug here? This is a solid plug, and this plug is 900 thousandths long on each side, pressed into the crank pin. Expanding that crank pin, the width of the part of the crank pin that's pressed in the flywheel. There's no reason to weld this, because it's not going to move anyways. S&S flywheels never need to be welded. My own personal bike, it's an S&S 124 with B2 heads, has over 43,000 miles on it, and the crankshaft is perfectly straight. It is unwelded. And let's face it, if S&S thought the crank needed to be welded for high performance street use, they'd probably weld it. Okay, if I don't need to weld them, and S&S doesn't think we need to weld them, neither do you. This is Rob from 2 Boss Performance. Thanks for listening. See you soon.